She hears the safety click off behind her a half-second before she feels the barrel press between her shoulder blades, and the wine glass she's holding shatters against the marble floor of the restaurant like a gunshot of its own. "Move and he dies too," the man behind her says, low, close to her ear. Isabella Conti doesn't move. She doesn't breathe. 15 feet away, at the private corner table he always sits at, Salvatore Marchetti goes still, not with fear, but with the terrifying calm of a man who has done this dance before. His eyes lock onto hers across the room, and for one unbearable second, neither of them says a word. Then he stands, slow, both hands lifted just enough to show he isn't reaching for anything, and the black ink, crawling up from his collar, across his throat, down both forearms where his sleeves are rolled to the elbow, seems to ripple as his jaw tightens. "Let her go," Salvatore says. "This is between you and me, is it?" The man behind Isabella laughs, and the gun presses harder. Funny, because 3 days ago, she's the one who walked into that back office and heard everything she wasn't supposed to hear. Isabella's stomach drops. He knows. Before she can process it, before she can even think about how she got here. A waitress from a family bakery in Bensonhurst, standing at gunpoint in the private dining room of a man the papers call a monster. Salvatore moves. It happens too fast to follow. 1 second he's standing with his hands raised. The next, the gunman is on the floor, choking on his own blood, and Salvatore's hand is wrapped tight around Isabella's wrist, pulling her behind him, his body between her and the two men now storming through the restaurant's front doors. "Stay behind me," he growls. "Whatever happens, do not let go of my hand." If you're already gripping your seat, wondering how a bakery girl ends up in the middle of a mafia war, hit that subscribe button now, because this story only gets more intense from here, and you will not want to miss where it goes. 6 weeks earlier, none of this existed. Isabella Conti was exactly what she looked like. A 29-year-old woman with flour permanently dusted into the creases of her apron, running the front counter of her family's bakery on a street corner in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, the same corner her grandmother had opened that bakery on 40 years before. She was curvy in the way her whole family was curvy, soft where it counted, strong in the arms from years of kneading dough, with a laugh that carried through the shop and made strangers smile before they even knew why. She liked who she was. She'd fought hard to like who she was, in a world that constantly told women built like her to apologize for taking up space, and she wasn't about to start apologizing now. Salvatore Marchetti walked into that bakery on a Tuesday morning in a black wool coat that cost more than her rent, and the whole shop seemed to hold its breath. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who he was. You didn't run cannolis past him without recognizing the man whose name alone made grown men lower their eyes. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, with dark hair pushed back, and ink visible at his collar and the backs of his hands. Full sleeves, people whispered. Tattoos running from his knuckles to his neck. A map of a life most people didn't survive. He ordered a coffee, black, nothing else. Isabella, who had never once been intimidated by a man, simply because everyone else was, looked him dead in the eye and said, "That's it? No sfogliatelle? You're going to break my grandmother's heart." Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, but close. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the 3rd week, he wasn't ordering just coffee anymore, and he wasn't leaving after 5 minutes. He'd sit in the corner booth for an hour, sometimes 2, watching her work the counter, laugh with regulars, scold a customer who was rude to her elderly father. And one evening, as she was locking up, he was waiting outside. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I need you to answer honestly. That depends what you're asking. Are you afraid of me?" Isabella considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. "Should I be?" "Yes, he said, without hesitation. Most people are. Most people should be. But you're asking because you don't want me to be. His jaw tightened, the way it did when he was choosing his next words carefully. I don't know what I want yet. I just know I keep finding reasons to come back to a bakery I have no business being in. It should have ended there. A smart woman would have let it end there. But Isabella had never been the kind of woman who backed away from something because it scared her. And 3 days later, when he asked her to dinner, somewhere private, somewhere no one would recognize either of them, she said yes. She had no idea that saying yes would put a target on her back within the month. She had no idea that the man across from her, tattoos disappearing beneath a crisp white shirt, danger folded so carefully under charm, was already fighting a war he hadn't told her about. A war that was about to walk straight through her front door. Comment below, would you have said yes to that dinner? Because Isabella's about to find out just how far down this rabbit hole really goes, and it starts with a name she's never supposed to hear. The dinner happened in a private room above a restaurant in Manhattan that didn't have a sign out front, the kind of place where the maitre d' knew Salvatore's order before he sat down and never wrote his name on anything. Isabella wore the green dress she'd bought for her cousin's wedding and never worn again, and when Salvatore stood to pull out her chair, she caught the way his eyes moved over her, not politely, not carefully, but like a man looking at something he genuinely wanted. "You look beautiful," he said. "You say that like you're surprised." "I say that because it's true." He sat across from her, and for a moment, the danger she'd sensed in him at the bakery seemed to fold away entirely, replaced by something almost boyish. A man who wasn't used to wanting things he couldn't just take. "Most women I bring to dinner spend the whole night waiting for me to tell them what they want to hear. I'm not most women." "No," he said quietly. "You're really not." They talked for 3 hours. About her grandmother, about the bakery, about a childhood in Brooklyn that had nothing and everything in it. He didn't talk about his work, and she didn't ask, not because she was afraid, but because some instinct told her the answer would change the way he looked at her, and she wasn't ready to lose the way he was looking at her right now. It was almost midnight when his phone buzzed on the table, and he glanced at it, and everything in his face went cold. "I have to go," he said, standing so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Salvatore, I'll have someone take you home." "Isabella." He stopped at the door, turned back, and for 1 second she saw something in his eyes she wouldn't understand until much later. Fear, not for himself. "Lock your door tonight. Don't answer it for anyone you don't know." He was gone before she could ask why. She didn't sleep that night. She kept replaying his face, the way pure charm had cracked open into something haunted in half a second. And by morning, when she opened the bakery, she told herself it was nothing. A business emergency. Men like him had those. She told herself that for 4 more days, until he showed up at closing time with a bruise darkening along his jaw, and 2 men she'd never seen standing guard outside the shop windows. "What happened to your face?" "It's nothing, Salvatore." She crossed the shop and put her hand against his jaw, before she could stop herself, and he let her, closing his eyes for one long breath, like her touch was the only soft thing he'd felt in days. "Tell me what's going on. I'm not stupid. I know who you are. I've known since the first day you walked in here. I just didn't care." He opened his eyes. "You should care. Tell me anyway." So he did. Not everything. Not that first night. But enough. That his family controlled territory that other families wanted. That a rival boss named Dominic Russo had spent the last 2 years trying to unite 3 smaller families against him, and that the bruise on his jaw was from a meeting that had nearly turned into a bloodbath that afternoon. That the reason he kept coming back to her bakery, kept finding reasons to sit in her corner booth, was because for 1 hour a day, in a shop that smelled like sugar and bread. Nobody was trying to kill him. So why tell me now? Isabella asked. Why not just disappear and let me think you got bored? Because Russo knows about you. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man forcing himself to stay calm. He's had someone watching this bakery for a week. If I disappear, you're still a target. You're just a target I'm not protecting anymore. The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. A target for what? For getting to me. For making me weak enough to make a mistake. He reached out and took her hand, and his grip was tight enough that she understood, finally, exactly how afraid he was. I need you to let me protect you. I need you to trust me, even though I know I haven't earned it yet. If this kind of slow burn tension is pulling you in, drop a comment and tell me. Should Isabella run while she still can, or is it already too late? I want to know what you'd do in her position, because what happens next is going to test her more than she ever imagined. She should have said no. Every rational part of her screamed to say no, to tell him to leave, to go back to her normal life, her flour-dusted counters and Sunday dinners, and a world where the biggest danger was a bad review online. But she looked at this man, tattoos disappearing under his collar, fear behind his eyes for her and not for himself, and she understood something with total clarity. It was already too late. It had been too late since the first cup of black coffee. Okay, she said. Protect me. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. You don't know what you're agreeing to. Then explain it to me. All of it. I'm not going anywhere, Salvatore. Not now. What he told her next would change everything. Not just about the danger she was walking into, but about the woman he was supposedly engaged to marry. A woman Isabella had never even heard mentioned until that night, and whose name would soon mean the difference between Salvatore's life and his death. Her name was Vittoria Salerno, and Salvatore said it like it tasted bitter in his mouth. An arrangement, he said, sitting across from Isabella, in the back office of the bakery after closing, the shades drawn, one of his men posted outside the door. Made by our fathers 15 years ago, before either of us had a say in it. Her family controls the ports on the Jersey side. Mine controls distribution through the city. A marriage keeps both territories united against families like Russo's. You're engaged, Isabella said it flatly, testing the shape of the words in her mouth, waiting to feel something break inside her chest. It did. On paper. His jaw was tight. I haven't touched her in 2 years. I haven't wanted to since long before that. It's a business contract with a ring attached, Isabella, and I have spent the last 4 weeks trying to figure out how to break it without starting a war I can't win yet. And now Russo knows about you, which means I need to move faster than I planned. He reached across the desk and took her hand, and despite everything, the fear, the danger, the sheer impossibility of the situation, she let him. I need Vittoria to believe the arrangement is still solid until I've dealt with Russo. After that, I end it, publicly. I choose you, out loud, where everyone can see. And if she finds out before then? His silence answered the question better than words could have. For the next 3 weeks, Isabella lived a double life she never asked for. Mornings at the bakery, flour under her nails, her grandmother teasing her about the new boyfriend, who sent flowers but never came inside anymore. Not since the threat became real. Nights in a penthouse on the Upper East Side she wasn't supposed to be photographed leaving, learning the terrifying rhythm of Salvatore's world, which men could be trusted, which streets to avoid, how to read the tension in his shoulders that meant a call had come in that meant somebody, somewhere, was dead. She met Vittoria only once, by accident, in the lobby of Salvatore's building, a striking woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, dressed like she'd never once in her life doubted her own beauty. Vittoria looked Isabella up and down with a slow, deliberate cruelty. "You must be the baker," Vittoria said, smiling with no warmth in it at all. "Salvatore does love his little charity projects." "And you must be the woman he hasn't touched in 2 years," Isabella said, sweet as sugar, and watched Vittoria's smile falter for just a second before she turned and walked away on heels that clicked like gunshots against the marble. If you're loving Isabella's confidence right now, let me know in the comments, because a woman like Vittoria doesn't just walk away from an insult like that. She plans. Isabella didn't think much of the encounter until 2 nights later, when Salvatore came home later than usual, his face carved from stone, and told her that one of his warehouses on the Brooklyn waterfront had burned to the ground. "Russo?" she asked. "That's what I thought." He poured himself a drink he didn't touch. "Until I found out who tipped off the fire crew to stay away for 20 extra minutes, long enough for the whole shipment to burn." Who? Someone inside Vittoria's family's dock operation. Someone who had no reason to help Russo unless somebody on my side of the arrangement wanted me to look weak in front of my own men. Isabella felt the floor tilt beneath her again, the way it had the night he first told her the truth. "You think she's working with Russo?" "I think," Salvatore said slowly, "that a woman who spent 15 years being told who to marry might finally be done waiting for me to keep my end of a bargain I never wanted in the first place. And I think Russo would happily promise her the very thing I'm about to take away. Control, freedom, a family that finally answers to her instead of around her. So what do? We wait." He finally drank. "We let her think the arrangement is still solid. We let Russo think he's winning. And when they're both comfortable enough to get careless, we find out exactly how deep this goes. Together, if you're not too afraid." "I already told you," Isabella said, taking his hand, steadying it against the tremor she could feel running through him. "I'm not going anywhere." She had no idea, in that moment, just how literally that promise was about to be tested, because 3 nights later, an invitation would arrive for a private dinner at Salvatore's favorite restaurant, supposedly to finally, formally end the engagement in front of both families. Vittoria would be there. Russo's people would be there, uninvited and armed. And a waitress with nothing to lose and everything to protect would be the only person in the room who noticed the man rotating tables, who didn't know how to properly carry a serving tray. The invitation came on cream cardstock with gold lettering, hand-delivered by one of Vittoria's men, and Salvatore read it twice before setting it down on the kitchen counter, like it might detonate. "Formal dinner, both families. A public announcement," he said. "She wants to end things where everyone can see it, which means either she's finally ready to let me go, or she's planning something and wants witnesses to whatever happens next. Which do you think it is? With Vittoria, it's never just one thing." He rubbed a hand across his jaw, the tattoos on his knuckles catching the kitchen light. "I need you there." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Salvatore, I'm a baker. I don't belong in a room with your entire family and hers. You don't have to sit at the table." His eyes met hers, steady despite everything. "I need eyes in that room I trust completely. A waitress moves through a room like furniture. Nobody watches her. Nobody clocks what she notices. I've already arranged it with the owner. Nobody will know you're anything more than staff. You want me to spy on your own engagement dinner. I want you to help me survive it." She should have said no again. She said yes again, the same way she always did with him now, with her whole chest, even when her mind was screaming caution. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't take walk-ins. All dark wood and low gold light, and Isabella spent 2 days learning the floor plan, memorizing which door led to the kitchen, which led to the alley, where Salvatore's men would be stationed, and where they wouldn't. On the night of the dinner, she tied her hair back, pulled on the black uniform the owner provided, and told herself this was no different than working a busy Saturday at the bakery. It was nothing like working a busy Saturday at the bakery. She was refilling water glasses at a nearby table when she first noticed him. A waiter, near the kitchen doors, who held his serving tray wrong, wrist locked instead of loose. The posture of a man who'd learned the job in an afternoon instead of a lifetime. She watched him for 3 full minutes, her pulse climbing, before she saw the second one. Then the third, positioned near the exits, all of them wearing the restaurant's uniform, none of them moving like people who'd ever carried a tray before tonight. Across the room, Vittoria sat beside Salvatore, looking radiant and untouchable, her hand resting on his arm with proprietary ease, and every few minutes her eyes flicked toward the door. Not nervous, Isabella realized. Waiting. Isabella's hands were shaking by the time she reached the kitchen, and she grabbed the first cloth napkin she could find, and a pen from the host stand, scrawling 4 words she prayed Salvatore would understand before it was too late. Your fiancé sold you out. They're in position. She's spent the whole dinner hiding in plain sight, but the second she folds that napkin, there's no going back. If your heart is racing right now, that's exactly where I want it, because everything from here happens in real time. She carried a water pitcher back to the table, hands steady through sheer will, and as she leaned in to refill Salvatore's glass, she pressed the folded napkin into his palm beneath the table's edge. His fingers closed around it without his expression changing at all. Years of practice, she realized, at hiding exactly what he felt. He unfolded it in his lap, glanced down for half a second, and Isabella watched something in him go utterly, lethally calm. Excuse me, he said smoothly, rising from the table. I need a word with the kitchen about the wine. Vittoria's smile flickered, just barely. Now, we haven't even made the announcement yet. It'll only take a moment, Cara. He kissed the top of her head. A performance. Isabella understood now, watching his eyes track every fake waiter in the room in the same motion, and walked toward the kitchen doors, close enough to Isabella to murmur 4 words of his own. Get behind the bar. She didn't move fast enough. The man nearest the kitchen door reached under his serving tray, and Isabella felt everything slow down at once. The glint of metal, the way Salvatore's whole body shifted from a walk into something else entirely. A controlled violence she'd never seen in him before, fast and precise, and utterly without hesitation. Someone screamed. A chair went over, and then a hand closed around Isabella's wrist from behind, cold and hard, and she felt the barrel of a gun press between her shoulder blades, exactly where the story began. Move and he dies too, the man said in her ear, and Isabella, frozen in the wreckage of a wine glass she hadn't even felt herself drop, finally understood she was standing in the exact center of the moment that would decide everything. Whether Salvatore's world consumed her whole, or whether the two of them would survive long enough to build something neither family had ever chosen for them. If you've made it this far, you already know how invested I am in these two, so let me know in the comments who you think is really pulling Russo's strings, because the answer is about to change everything. One more part left. It's the one you've been waiting for. Time didn't move the way it should have. Isabella felt the gun press harder against her spine, felt her own pulse hammering so loud she was sure the whole room could hear it, and across the wreckage of overturned chairs and shattered glass, Salvatore's eyes found hers. Let her go, he said again, quieter this time, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd shouted. You put a gun on her. You've already lost. You just don't know it yet. The man behind Isabella laughed, low and ugly. Big words for a man who's about to watch. He didn't finish the sentence. Salvatore moved before the last word left his mouth, closing the distance in a blur, and the gun at Isabella's back swung wide as the man behind her turned to meet the threat. She threw herself sideways, hit the floor hard behind an overturned table, and covered her head as the room dissolved into chaos. Shouting, a single gunshot that cracked off the high ceiling. Salvatore's men pouring in from the kitchen doors where they'd apparently been waiting the entire time, because of course, he hadn't walked into that dinner without a plan of his own. When it was over, 30 seconds, maybe less, though it felt like an hour, the fake waiters were on the ground, disarmed, and Salvatore was crouched beside Isabella's overturned table, hands framing her face, checking her for injuries, with a desperation that cracked straight through his careful composure. "I'm fine," she said breathless, gripping his wrists. "I'm fine, Salvatore. I'm fine. You could have died." His voice broke on the last word. "You could have died because of me. I'm not dead. Look at me. I'm right here." Across the ruined dining room, Vittoria stood frozen by the overturned head table, and for the first time all night, her composure had shattered completely. Salvatore rose slowly, pulling Isabella up with him, and turned toward the woman he'd been engaged to for 15 years. "You knew," he said. "Not a question." "Salvatore, I didn't." "Don't." The single word cut through the room like a blade. Russo's men don't get restaurant uniforms and floor plans without help from inside. You've been feeding him information for months. The warehouse fire. Tonight. All of it. Vittoria's chin lifted, and beneath the fear something colder surfaced. Years of resentment finally given permission to speak. "You think I wanted this life, Salvatore? Handed to another man by our fathers like property? Russo offered me something you never did. A choice. I chose it. You chose to have me killed." "I chose to be free of you," she snapped. "There's a difference, even if you're too much of a coward to see it." Salvatore's men moved in around her, and Isabella watched the woman who'd once looked at her with such casual cruelty finally understand exactly how much danger she'd invited into her own life. Whatever happened to Vittoria after that night wasn't something Isabella needed to witness. Salvatore guided her firmly toward the door, out into the cold night air, away from a war that belonged to a world she'd only ever visited, never fully lived in. They didn't speak until they were 3 blocks away, the sirens finally fading behind them, both of them still shaking with adrenaline neither had fully processed. "I need to ask you something," Salvatore said finally, stopping beneath a street lamp, still holding her hand like he might lose her if he let go. "And I need the truth. Okay, after tonight, after everything you saw, everything you now know I am, do you still want this? Because I can end it. All of it. The families, the business, the danger. I can walk away and give you the kind of life you actually deserve. Ordinary, safe." "Boring, even." Isabella looked at this man. Tattoos disappearing beneath a torn, blood-flecked collar. Hands that had just saved her life shaking now with something far more vulnerable than violence. And she felt something settle inside her chest that had nothing to do with fear at all. "I never wanted ordinary," she said. "I wanted you. The whole terrifying, complicated, impossible truth of you. That hasn't changed just because tonight was the worst night of my life. Isabella, I'm not asking you to be someone else. I'm asking you to let me stand next to who you actually are." She reached up and pressed her palm flat against his chest. Over the ink she'd learned every inch of in the last 3 weeks. Over the heart that had apparently decided, somewhere in the middle of a burning warehouse and a ruined engagement dinner, that it belonged to a baker from Bensonhurst who refused to be afraid of him. "So stop asking me to leave." "I already told you. I'm not going anywhere." Salvatore Marchetti, a man who had buried more enemies than he could count, who had built an empire on fear and inherited a war he never asked for, stood beneath a Manhattan street lamp, and finally, for the first time in his adult life, let himself believe that something good could survive in the world he came from. 3 months later, the bakery on that Bensonhurst corner had a new regular in the corner booth every single morning. No bodyguards standing outside anymore. no threats hanging over either of their heads. Just a man in a rolled-sleeve shirt drinking black coffee and watching the woman he loved run a shop that smelled like sugar and second chances. If this story had you holding your breath from the very first line, that's exactly what we're here for. So hit like, share this with someone who needs a slow-burn mafia romance in their life, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because trust me, this one's just getting started.